Hello and welcome to Aviation this week on Channels Television. I'm Bukola Joe Oketsumbi. On this edition of the program, we're talking aircraft leasing. What exactly is aircraft lease? Why is it important for airlines? And what is the cost implication to their operations? This and more is what we intend to look at. And our background report is up next.
Nearly half of the passenger airlines flying today are leased by the airlines from big plane leasing companies. The main reason is because it's cheap. Airlines lease aircraft from other airlines or leasing companies for two main reasons: to operate aircraft without the financial burden of buying them and to provide temporary increase in capacity. The industry has two main leasing types: wet leasing, which is normally used for short-term leasing, and dry leasing, which is more normal for longer-term leases. The industry also uses combination of wet and dry. For example, when the aircraft is wet leased to establish new services, then as the airline's flight or cabin crews become trained, they can be switched to a dry lease. Wet lease is a leasing arrangement whereby one airline known as the lessor provides an aircraft, complete crew, maintenance and insurance to other airline with the acronym ACMI, or other type of business acting as a broker of air travel called the leasee, which pays by hours operated. The leasee provides fuel and covers airport fees and any other duties, taxes, etc. The flight uses the flight number of the leasee. A wet lease generally lasts 1 to 24 months. A wet lease aircraft may be used to fly services into countries where the leasee is banned from operating. A dry lease is a leasing arrangement whereby an aircraft financing entity known as the lessor provides an aircraft without crew, ground staff and other supports. Dry lease is typically used by leasing companies and banks, requiring the lessee to put the aircraft on its own AOC and provide aircraft registration. A typical dry lease lasts upwards of 2 years and bears certain conditions with respect to depreciation, maintenance, insurances, depending also on the geographical location and political. This is an arrangement where the lessor provides the aircraft, flight, crew and maintenance, but the lessee provides the cabin crew. Damp lease is an arrangement where the lessor provides the aircraft, flight crew and maintenance, but the lessee provides the cabin crew. At the end of July 2015, the top 50 aircraft lessors managed 8,184 aircrafts, of which 511 were turboprop regional airlines, 792 regional jets, 5,612 narrow-body, and 1,253 wide-body airliners. In 2017, 150 lessors are managing 8,400 aircrafts worth $256 billion and 2,321 aircrafts in backlog from 81 of them, with their penetration stabilized at 42.6%. Aircraft lessors are often banks, hedge funds and financial institutions. But here in Africa, aircraft leasing is a nightmare for operators, as the absence of aircraft leasing firms on the continent forces operators to swallow the lessor's stiff conditions.
When an airline is charting out a new course, especially when it's developing a long-haul route, a wet lease option is the best, especially when it does not have the adequate kind of equipment. That's coming from our guest, the managing director of Skyplan Dubai. He spoke to Aviation this week recently on a visit to that city.
It's like a car taken on a hire purchase, and you just pay the lease agreement, lease rental every month. So the cost on a dry lease is less, but sometimes what happens when you're going into a complex operation, especially long hauls, airlines do prefer in the beginning to take aircrafts from companies which is more experienced on the market, thereby establishing the market and then going in for the next level. It's not always about the money. It's always about the availability of parts, maintenance, safety, all those factors which comes in when we have a big support of an operations. So Medview, starting London and Dubai, these are two critical airports which is very demanding in terms of flight operations. So I think they have done a good job to start with on this, and we are hoping that they will take more aircrafts on ownership and dry lease in a mix with everything. When the airline starts going from a wet lease to a dry lease, it's the transition which happens, but normally you don't have two different models. Two different models comes in. Let's say you have a big fleet of dry lease aircrafts with you, and suddenly there is a demand of new aircraft sectors coming up. The availability of new aircrafts in the market, you have to wait in a queue, and leasing companies are not there. So what you do to support or augment your operations, you take aircrafts from other leasing companies or other operators on wet lease. They come into your fleet, but is maintained by their crew, so that your operations can then immediately, when you need an immediate boost of your operations, that's the time you do a mix match. The advantage is, for a startup, it's always good when they're not sure of what they, or see, when you take an aircraft, you have to have pilots which is rated for the aircraft. There is training, there's cost which is incurred. You have to have engineers which is trained on the aircraft, there's a cost. There's a maintenance downtime which is a cost. Let's say one engine goes down, and if you do not have a maintenance program or an engine program which is supported, it's a huge cost to the airline. There's a downtime of the aircraft. Let's say today, when the aircraft has a problem, it has to go back for a A check, B check, C check, anything.